Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Hockey Toolkit, episode 33. I am Trevor DiCarlo, and I am joined by my co-host.
Andrew Trimble.
Yeah, that's your name. There must be like a little bit of a delay or something, but I'll figure that out in
This is a
post-production. But
professional this is professional recording quality.
if people knew how much money I paid for Zoom, they would crap their pants.
Me too.
But yeah, so it's been a while. Coach, how have you been? What's new in your world?
Good. It's been once we concluded the season, it gets right into recruiting season, and kind of been all over the place, recruiting and building the teams for next year. So really been busy with that. How about yourself, Trevor?
Lately, we were just got done with our spring season. Actually, in between the two gaps here, we had the 200 by 85 runs the CCM. Was it Chi-Town Shuffle? I think it is something like that. Um, and then we had another one that we played in here with the 10Us, 2014s that I got this upcoming year. So we like knocked out two tournaments between the last two episodes. So that's pretty much kind of it. We're running down. Got a couple days left, or not a couple days, a couple weeks left. But then it's nice little break from the rink a little bit. So
Good. Yeah.
yeah, how's scouting going? I know you went overseas. How's that been?
Yeah, so I did a long trip to Huntsville, Alabama, and was down for the Saha camp, and that was a good experience. Huntsville is one of the, I don't know if you've ever been, but it's a great city. It's such a small, quaint city, but they've got a lot of hockey down there. They've had professional hockey in the Southern Professional League for a long time, and then they've also had Alabama Huntsville for a number of years at the Division I level. They were kind of stymied by COVID, so they don't really have a team anymore. But there's a real hockey culture in Huntsville, so it was good being down there. Then I came back to New Hampshire for a few days and right to go to the Czech Republic and go to our Czech tryout camp, and that was a really good experience as well. And looks like we'll get a number of players from that camp. So really, it's been all over the place, but it's been really positive and great to interact with a lot of different coaches. At the Saha camp, I interact with a lot of college coaches, so it's good to build some relationships with those guys. And then at the Czech tryout camp, I interact with other junior coaches, which is nice, either from other leagues, which is really, I've always claimed that there's good programs in every single league. I'm not like one guy who's like the EHL is the only league in America. There's a lot of good leagues out there, and
Right.
good interacting with kids from different cultures and some of the coaches over in the Czech Republic. So couldn't be happier. Everything's going really well.
No, I mean that sounds like a good time, and as you said, you're basically building out that branch of different connections, and those you can always now you got those little ones you could tap into. Obviously, if you're using your LinkedIn account, you can just build it off your connections that way too. But how many so the kind of like the Czech. I almost said like the Czech, like scouting report, but the you're see it's been a while, so I get to shake this shit out. At least I don't have a lawsuit pending. Just kidding. So how did the Czech scouting trip go? Is that just your team? And I believe last time you talked about it, there's a couple teams that go. What do you kind of do in those during that trip?
Yeah, so it's over the course of 3 days. They had an on ice practice to start, which I got a chance to be on the ice with Daniel Cerny, who's our Czech scout for the Wolves, but he also runs his own business over there in the Czech Republic, and he's a really good guy and a really good coach.
Good.
So it was good to be on the ice with those guys, and then after that we did a number of seminars where we get the kids get acclimated with some of the programs that are represented there, and then they get into their own scrimmages over the next couple 36 hours, and it's good to see the kids in game action. And then we do a Q&A session usually like on Saturday night where they're able to ask questions of some of the coaches that are there and get to know those programs. We do kind of a video presentation so they can see oh, this program is located in a city or a town or whatever it may be, or the different development models. And it's a good way to kind of build a relationship with some of those kids and actually get to see that, their interest level from there. So couldn't be happy with the trip. We've done it now for a couple of years, and I expect we'll continue to do it even more going in the future.
What do you expect wise players for this upcoming season for the Wolves itself on this trip? How many players are going to be possibly joining you guys from uh what's Czechia now, right?
Yeah, I always say Czech Republic, but yeah, I think you're
I
right.
mean, I do too. It's on every puck still, but that I
And
own.
then
But
every person in the previous generation says Czechoslovakia. Like
right, exactly,
my
right.
father-in-law always says Czechoslovakia. My mom says Czechoslovakia, but it's definitely Czechia. I think that's you're the
For
right on
once,
that one, Trevor.
yeah, that's all right. I'm politically correct on that one.
Yeah. We at both levels, EHL and the EHLP, were either the youngest or close to the youngest team in the league last year. So we have kind of a unique situation where there's a lot of kids returning or moving up or within the program. So there's not a ton of holes we had to fill, but we've identified some of those holes, and I think we'll get some really good players out of it. There's always, there's always some kids that come to those camps that are kind of at the higher end level who want a North American opportunity. So I think that's really where it's a good place for us that, you have a lot of people fishing out of the same pond here in the U.S. If we go to and I don't want to name too many showcases, but there's a lot of junior hockey showcases here in the U.S. and they're just inundated with NA3 or USPHL or EHL or some of the leagues in Canada.
Right.
Whereas when I go there, there's kind of a name recognition that, oh, this kid played for the Wolves last year. This kid played for the Wolves a year or two prior. So there's a familiarity where we may not get that if we were to go to a showcase in Vegas or Denver or somewhere else. It's different, become different for us. So that's really positive.
No, that's great. I mean, I have as well sat in those showcases out here in the States where you are basically one of like just hunting. It's like a meat market and everybody's talking to everybody. I mean, kids barely have enough, can't even carry their water bottle and sticks out because they've got so many cards and brochures and, trying to set up meetings with the kids like, oh yeah, let's go, let's sit down and, we want to offer you this, and that. And like, it's not even the kid's decision. It's mom and dad who you got to have in there. So yeah, I mean, it's awesome that you guys got a pipeline over there. And that you guys are able
It's like
to,
hanging out at DJs in Belmar, New Jersey on a Friday night in the summer. Fist pumping, tons of people, just people throwing cards, buying drinks. It's a big deal, man.
cabs are here. Yeah, that's, no, that's cool. I mean, I think that's a great way for that you've been able to do this. And again, it's like a little pipeline that, not many teams it sounds like are investing, especially, even though we say tier three, I mean, at the pay to play level are investing in that type of outside recruitment. Or, just yeah, I mean scouting. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think like the bang for your buck. Like we could go to 3 showcases and the flights could each be $500-600, or we can go to one showcase and it's $1,000. We get 3 or 4 players out of it. Like
Right.
this is how you want to spend your money, and it's been successful for us, and it'll continue to be. And I also like really, the last couple of years I've been in the Czech Republic. It's a great country. It's really beautiful, and it's so I'll tell a funny story. So I'm driving with Daniel in the car from the airport in Prague, and they have these really unique plants that grow. You can see my hands are. I was painting the house today.
I was about to say,
Now
what is
I
your house
know
black?
the month of May is now. I'm on the honey-do list, but so I'm driving
Neglected at
with
the end of
Daniel.
11.
For sure. So I'm driving with Daniel, and we're on the highway, and it's just there's all these this yellow plant that's like everywhere, and I was like, that looks kind of like dandelions. I was like, what is that stuff, Daniel? And he's like, oh, that's rape. And I was like, what are you talking about here? And he like tried to like do the Google Translate, and it's a thing called rapeseed, which I never even heard of. I have no idea what that is. And he's like, you use it for
Yeah.
it's like a cooking oil, but it's all over the Czech countryside, and it's this. I had never seen it before. I had no idea what it was, but it's literally like it's one of their primary exports is this rapeseed oil, which they produce from this plant called the rape plant or something like that. So
Spelled exactly like a serious violent offense. Like, is that
correct. And I was
wow?
like, yeah, I don't think you really mean that, Daniel. And he was like, no, that's what it is. It's for raping.
Yeah, jeez. Like they couldn't have thought of a better. Well, I mean, I guess. Yeah, that's something else. But what I mean, at this point, what are you I know your Devils oh, my Blackhawks are in the playoffs. The Devils didn't even make the playoffs.
I know it's
Uh
been a tough spring for us.
yeah. I mean, I saw that at least now there's no conspiracy theories about the Blackhawks being like the league favorites because we didn't win the lottery, so we're not gonna get to celebrate any. But have you been watching some of the playoffs when you can?
Yeah, I got actually the Rangers Carolina game on out of the corner of my eye here. Um, and I've been watching a lot of. I like watching Colorado. They're impressive. Um, and then this Carolina Ranger series is a pretty tough series. It's been interesting that Bruins Florida matchup too. They had two
Yeah,
lopsided
last night was a
scores.
doozy.
Yeah, in either game it was lopsided. One game for Boston, game two was lopsided for Florida. But
Yeah.
there's some real rivalry there now. They've built
Oh,
that.
I before I head over to a different NHL team, what are your thoughts about, again as a coach, and again the EHL allow you guys no well, let's rephrase that. No league allows fighting, but the EHL, if you were to get a fighting major, is it just like in college? Game you're done and you get a game misconduct, and you're suspended next game? How's that work?
Yeah, you're suspended. You're kicked out of that game. There is a video review plot process because the officials in our league tend to be young and they want to kind of control the situations at a pretty high level. So they tend to give fightings when they're not really a fight. But I get why they're doing that because they want to kind of protect themselves and they know that the video review process exists, so we can go back and potentially change a call. And the league has been, last year was run by Joe Britannia, who we've had on the podcast, and
Yep.
who won the Lester Patrick Award, excuse me. So he knows what he's looking at, and he did a great job this year in terms of like making the right call when they went back into it. I would say once out of every 9, 10 games, somewhere in that ballpark, there's an altercation like that. But it's not a common thing. And definitely if there's with that review process in place, if it's like a staged fight, like a pre-planned fight, there's more that they can add on to it. So it's really, it's a college placement league, the EHL, and there's no real fighting in college. So
Right.
that's the primary objective.
But I mean, just like in college, where if you were to go out and get in a stage fight, I mean, you get that game, and then you basically get DQ'd for, you're out for the next game as well.
Yes, and that
Okay.
exists with us too. We do follow now. We left USA Hockey. This will be our third season outside of USA Hockey. So now that allows us to follow the NCAA rulebook, which was one of the goals of the league. I know that we had an advising company who threw out all these claims of why teams leave, why like outrageous claims of why they leave governing bodies, but the
Advising
real reason
companies.
was, I
Yeah.
know, advising people on bad information. But it was like we left the league because
Allegedly.
we want a larger player pool in a lot of respects. We wanted to reduce costs for our athletes, and then also we wanted to play by NCAA rules because that's the final destination for our athletes.
So, to sum up my questions, to basically put this together, last night, as we saw, Kachuk and Pasternak got into it. Um, what are your thoughts as a coach? I mean, as a fan, I'm pretty sure I've got the same thoughts of that's awesome. That's fun to see. But as a coach, how do you feel about your potential star player, going out and getting in a fight with someone? I'll bet it's the same, star player on the other team, but you're losing. You've got really, you do have something to prove, I guess. But like, what are your thoughts about your star player going out and getting in a fight and a blowout?
I think that like Pasternak, like he's going to go in that locker room and um, he's setting a standard and a pace of what's an acceptable game for his team. I think that says a lot to his teammates that he's not, the game's not over. We're not mailing it in. It's like, he's not going to get somebody to fight his battles. Like, I always really impressed with Pasternak, even though he doesn't have a ton of experience fighting. That was pretty
No.
obvious after the
Right.
first 3 or 4 seconds. But like, hey, man, he that was awesome. I a newfound respect for Pasternak for sure.
I mean, the only thing that probably hurts right now or after that for him was probably like his hands just from all the fucking high fives he was getting from his
Yeah.
teammates in the locker room. But I mean, I thought it was great because I mean, yeah, you could sit here and say, "Oh my gosh, what happens if he gets injured?" Like, okay, it's not that likely it to happen. I mean, it happens, don't get me wrong, but it's not that likely. But what I liked about it was he went right up to like Montgomery beforehand. I was like, hey, Kachuk wants to fight me. Can I fight him? Montgomery's like, yeah, sure, go. I mean, and like Montgomery didn't even like it didn't even look like he hesitated. He's like, yeah, fuck. Like it looked like he's like, yeah, fuck yeah, just go. And I agree with you. I mean, I think it sets the tone that yeah, we're not gonna back down. We're not gonna put up with your bullshit. We're not gonna, okay, fine, you got this game, but like, I know how there's a lot of people in certain areas of life who don't like, comparing sports to like military and war and stuff. But I mean, it's like literally you're going to war with your brothers for like potentially up to 7 games against the same opponent. Like you want to go like, okay, you won this battle here, but there's still potentially 5 more games we're gonna be just beating the piss out of each other for. So I liked it too. I had no problem with it. I would have had no problem with it as a coach either. But, but kind of swing it over to the other side of the NHL. Sheldon Keefe got fired today. What are your thoughts on that, coach? And would you even want that job right now?
That's really tough. I mean, Toronto's in a real tough spot. I think Kevin Weeks said it kind of best, or one of those guys on NHL Network said it best. Everybody says, "Oh, I don't know if Toronto has enough defense, or I don't know if Toronto has the right goaltender," but they lost the game 7-2 to 1, and they didn't get scoring from their, $40 million for, 4 players were making 40 million bucks out of that salary cap number. They didn't get the scoring out of those guys. So where do you go from there? Do you have to break up that core? It's the coach isn't putting the puck in the net. Like I mean, is he utilizing those
Right. No,
athletes in the
yeah.
right respect? I don't know, but I think there needs to be a real shuffling of the deck. Like you can't just mix up, bring in new third line guys or fourth line guys because you need to add this or that. I mean, they had, the goaltending was good enough to win. It was good enough to win, but they didn't get the scoring when they needed it. What are your thoughts, Trev?
I mean, it's tough. I think the NHL coaches like shelf life is just keeps diminishing. It's like getting lower and lower, like less and less time. Um, but I mean, I think Keith definitely. I mean, he's had plenty of chances. What was it, 4 or 5
Yeah,
years? Like, it's not like we're talking about this is like his first or his second year getting bounced in the first round. Um, it's tough. I mean, you lose Nylander. I think they lost him in what game 3 or 4. They lost Matthews in what 5 and 6. So, I mean, that doesn't help. But I don't know what you do with that team besides jettison one of the players and hopefully try and bring somebody else back in. Because as you said, you can't just keep plugging, like spots with third and fourth liners. I mean, no offense. I watched David Camp play, for the Blackhawks, and he's not a third line center. Like they need to find someone who, I mean, there's a spot you can plug, but I don't know, and but I don't know if it's coaching either though, because I mean, I don't know what more you can do. I think it's just the roster construction maybe a little bit where you gotta, you know, like I said, I think Marner's the one who's out. I think he's
yeah.
honestly, I think it sounds like he's the one who could potentially be out. Um,
Well, he's the
and
only one too that you can get like pieces for. Like right now, I don't know
right,
if Tavares, you're selling him at a
no.
low point. Like, what are you going to get in return? Like he makes so much money, you're going to have to retain salary. Like,
He's got a lot of miles on him. He's got 16 years in the league. I see it as yeah, Marner is the one who's most likely you can get something out of. Um, you might be able to get some, some quality out of there. Plus, you'll get a little bit of cap relief. And I was looking at some of the guys that are out there that might be eligible, and Stamkos, maybe he's gonna be a UFA this year. Maybe he wants to come back home and actually come
Yeah,
back home this time. And there's a guy you could slot in as your, hell, having him as your second line center. Hell, even if you have to bump him down to your third line center, I don't know. I don't even remember who their second liner is, but oh, Tavares, duh. So I mean, Stamkos, or he's running on the wing there. I mean, there's a guy I mean, another guy that I was thinking of was Patrick, Patty Kane out there. That's not a bad guy to have. He'll probably come cheap too. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't want I wouldn't want to be Brad traveling right now because that's a lot of stuff you've got to figure out. Um, but I do know that I mean, I don't. It's tough. It's a tough position. I don't even know if like. I mean, yeah, of course I would want the job, but if I was like an NHL tenured coach, I don't know if I would. That would be a one that I would want with so much media scrutiny on you 24/7, with the way things have gone. Like, yeah, I think there's got to be some. I mean, I don't even know if it's a culture change. Like, I really don't. That's the tough part. I don't know.
I know what you mean,
Team
and
like that
they,
shouldn't suck.
I know, and they can't get out of that first round. This episode tonight, we're going to have a guest on where we're talking about coaching the coaches, and you're seeing a lot of that coaching carousel come through. Now, you have in addition to Sheldon Keefe being fired, you have Travis Green being fired by the Devils and rehired by Ottawa.
Oh
Lindy
yeah.
Ruff was fired about 2 months ago from the Devils. He's going back to Buffalo.
Yeah.
What recent hiring do you think has the best chance for success?
Um, I mean, out of all of them, I think Ruff probably he's I think that team's a little bit more stacked and solid than the Senators. I wouldn't say by much, but I really like how that Sabres team's built. I think they've got
Yeah,
two super strong, I mean, star defensemen in, Rasmus Dahlin already, and then you got Owen Power still coming up.
yeah.
They've got great, some great centers, some great overall scoring. I think it's just a bad year overall for them, but I would say them. Um, and then I mean that's about it. I mean, what out of the two? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Out of those two, I'd probably agree with you that I wasn't impressed with Travis Green, like the job he did with the Devils. They were looking for like that new coach bump, and actually he did worse than Lindy Ruff. So um, I think Ottawa has a lot of potential as a team, but I think they're going to go through a little bit of a shakeup here too. They might move some of those core pieces out. There's some rumors with Brady Tkachuk, so that'll
Yeah.
be interesting as we go further here. But in respect to that too, like what do you think is the most desirable coaching vacancy? You have San Jose, you have the Devils, you have Toronto. There might be a couple other coaching vacancies. St. Louis, they have a coaching vacancy.
I believe they well I know yeah Berube's out there, so I don't know. They didn't no they hired or they took the interim tag off their head coach.
Oh, they did.
So
They gave him the
yeah,
full time gig. Who?
yeah.
What is the most desirable? You think landing spot? Like if you were a coach coming up, and you had maybe some NHL experience as an assistant or at a previous coaching tenure, where would you want to? We'd be like, oh, I want that job. Well, what is a good looking job to you, Trevor?
I mean, out of those three, God, it's tough. Because you can go in a couple of different ways. You could go the way of, do I want to, one of them is going to give me more time in the league than the other. And I pretty much think San Jose is going to give me more time, kind of like what Luke
Yes.
Richardson's going through with the Blackhawks right now. Because you're about to get, Celebrini, you've got a bunch of other young pieces that are already in place and coming up. Um, so you might have a few more extra years there where, you know, I mean, you'll still have time with the Devils and Leafs, but I would probably want to go. I go Devils though because they've got the pieces and it's not such a huge. Don't get me wrong, like New Jersey is a big time place. I get it. It's royalty out there, uh, but I think that one it's not as much pressure as it would be Toronto. So I would go. Um, yeah, I would go with the Devils first. I would then probably drop back down to the Sharks only because of that development time and getting to work with the younger players. And then I would probably go with the Leafs just because, but only because the Leafs last, only because there's just so much unknown still about what their roster is really going to look like coming up here, you know, this offseason, where I feel the Devils are kind of set. I mean, they've got their core pieces in place, and they don't doesn't seem like any of them need to be moved or they're really hurting. So that's where I would go. But what are you thinking?
I think they're actually the same way. I think San Jose, like you could have that gig, you could have one or two losing seasons, but be able to build on it and be given some leeway where you get a third or fourth year because the team is so young and is in such a growing stage. So if you want like a little bit of leg room there, I think San Jose would be actually a pretty good spot because then, like you said, they do have a chance to get the first. They have the first round, the first overall pick, right?
Right.
The Devils, it's kind of like it seems like Fitzgerald, like he struggles to pull the trigger on like making a coaching firing. Like
Yeah.
everybody was calling for Ruff's head at Christmas, and he gave him like 2 more months. Um, so I don't know if on the third time around here, like this is kind of his job now. If he doesn't hire the right coach, he's going to get fired. So I think that's a
Right.
pretty short leash. And then I think Toronto, like it's sink or swim, and it's not a lot of fun. So like, it's fun if you win. If you win a cup, I'm sure it'll be fantastic. But they got to get the right coach in there, and they got to get the right pieces. And I don't know if they have either of those things right now.
Yeah. And again, as you said, it. I just like not as a fresh coach coming in, like if as we played the scenario being like a coming up from the minors or coming up from an assistant. I just think that Leafs position is just going to be way too difficult to even kind of step your foot into because it's just, I mean, you're expected to freaking win like right away. Like it's not it, it's not like, okay, we're going to give you a year. Like no, you need to step in and figure it out now. And
Yeah,
I mean, the piece is already in place. Like they have that core. And it's kind of like when the Blackhawks, I mean, when the core finally dissolved, like that was when, like, obviously, Quenville got let go and a lot of the core was already being like, was already coming and going. So, like, his style of play, like, if you're a coach and you've got a certain style that you like to run, like, I don't think the Leafs are going to be the team that you're going to be able to get that opportunity with unless they have those pieces in place. Whereas San Jose, you might have more of that leeway because the players are younger and you might have a little bit more, Mike Greer seems like a guy who you could probably, you'll have his ear. So, um, I don't know. I mean, it's fun hypotheticals and stuff, but yeah, I don't mind Toronto losing though, because it's just funny because they just blow up everything. But
well, we're talking about coaching the coaches, and there's a lot of coach shuffling going on right now in the NHL. But what are things that you do in the summer in preparation for your season? And this could kind of segue into our upcoming guest. What are kind of some things that you do as a coach to prepare yourself for the season, and things that you can do to kind of sharpen your saw as a coach?
so, for myself, I have, like last year, I took part. I went out to Ann Arbor, and I saw, I was there for 3 days. The coaches site live seminars, which I thought was very interesting. It was just chock filled with a ton of information, and I did enjoy it. Um, that was one of the things. Um, and a lot of it's also just like kind of about talking to other people within the game, like, hey, what have you been working on, or what have you been seeing, and this and that. Um, hockey context wise, like, coaching books, it's not like they really come out that often. And I think the last coaching book that I actually read was uh Daryl Belfry's book, and that one was, and I like Daryl, don't get me wrong. I think he's phenomenal, but it was very difficult to follow, and you could tell like he's working with the top 0.05 or percent players. So it was a lot of terminology that was just, it was all over the place. So it was tough for me. per se, but I did get some information. So I mean, seminars, reading books. I mean, obviously stuff like this where we're interviewing and talking to people. Um, but you can even go on YouTube and find, different seminars and such that are from the past. And um, there's plenty of information out there. You just kind of got to look for it. But right before the season, I kind of want to have an idea of what my team will look like. Even right after tryouts, I could even do this. Have an idea what the team looks like or know what my team looks like. And then having known them, kind of have a plan for this throughout the season. Like, okay, this is where we want to get to, by February. So we got, you know, January, December, November, October, September. We're literally starting in September. Well, how do we want to map out these months here? And what is the most crucial part? And kind of branch out from there. And I'm always one who believes that you start, from the back end first. Um, so we work on those things and, we set it up so that, this is what we want to be teaching then. And then by the end of it, we can say, okay, well, this is where we want to be. This is where we know we're starting. And in between there, we can, we'll hit these spots. And if we feel like, what, this concept's not working or this, we need to go back, like we don't have to keep pushing further. We can go back and continue to work on that until we get it. So that's really what it is. It's just kind of, my own personal development learning as a coach. Um, as well as just then kind of as the season gets closer, just kind of building a plan for, what I would like to and my assistant coaches combined, like what we would want to accomplish. What do you do, coach?
Trevor, you've actually mentioned that a number of times, that mapping out the season. I think that's a great suggestion for any coach there. I kind of have a loose template that I kind of go off of oftentimes, but I think the way you mapped it out and the way you spelled it out for a lot of coaches, that's a really good tool. I read a lot of books. I actually read the Darryl Belfry book, and I agree with you. Actually, like some of the terminology that he was using, it wasn't always applicable to base level athletes, young players who were just starting out. It was dealing with advanced and elite players, and although that was great information, it wasn't always applicable to all levels of hockey. I think podcasts are great. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm on YouTube pretty regularly, like checking out some different drills. And when I go to these showcases or camps, I try to tend to watch a lot of the practices and maybe pick up a drill or two here and there. And I think that really helps a lot to add like a couple more drills as you go into the season that can really add change some dynamics to your practices. But I think that's all really helpful stuff.
Yeah, and it's again, it takes time and some of it is costly. I mean, we can't sit here and say like, oh, being able to take, for me, 3 days off of or yeah, 3 days off of a work, get a hotel room, and then pay for the seminars. Like that costs money. I am losing money, but I'm also gaining, obviously the knowledge and stuff. But like this year, I just couldn't swing it with, the time away from time off of work. So I won't be in attendance. That said, I mean, I do have their membership, so I get those seminars throughout the year. Um, Ice Hockey Systems he's got this huge seminars and webinars with Daryl Belfry actually himself on their website. I know a few of the guys up in Canada. I think Brock University, they do one as well. Um, and USA Hockey's actually been doing, I feel,
Yeah,
they're doing a bunch, which is great. I mean, so there's really not outside of time, I would say there's really no reason that a coach shouldn't be able to at least pick something up in the off season.
absolutely. Well, I think that's a good segue. We can kind of turn it over to our interview coming up with Pete Kamman. He's the former coach in chief for Montana State Hockey. He runs a program called Elevated Hockey, and he's also the head coach for the ACHA college program at Montana State University. So here's the interview with Pete Kamman. Well, welcome to the podcast, Pete Kamman. He's the head coach for Montana State University. He's been the coach in chief for the state of Montana through USA Hockey, and he also runs Elevated Hockey. We wanted to bring him on to talk about coaching the coaches as we approach the summer months here, how we can sharpen our saw and improve what we're doing as coaches. So, welcome on the podcast, Pete.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Andrew. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, it's good to connect with you. I know you and I have exchanged emails every now and then and talk hockey a little bit. So it's good to jump on the podcast. Appreciate it, guys.
Well, you got some good former Wolves there. I know. How's Tegan working out for you?
Yeah, Tegan's great, man. He's doing well and he's really stepped up. We had him play forward for a little while. We moved him back to D this past season, and he really settled into that role, and he's become a really big piece of our program, which is great. So
That's fantastic.
he's a nice piece for us. Yeah.
That's good to hear. That's always the stories you want to hear. Like, kids, and this is a different topic, but, whether you go NCAA, ACHA, it doesn't really matter. It's about the experience, getting your college education. This is my opinion. But then also having being an impactful part of a team. And it's good to hear that when your former players is doing that. So that's great stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for, ACHA, and I think a lot of people underestimate the quality of hockey, but also like what you touched on is it's not always, once you get to the collegiate level, like if you're not on a scholarship going to, getting paid to play and going into pros and stuff, like you've really got to measure a lot of other factors. And it's, it's the college hockey experience, the level of education, the culture, the fit, tuition, how expensive is a school. Like there's so many other factors that come into play, and the ACHA teams offer such a great alternative that I think, a lot of those programs are worth kids looking into more than I think some of them give them credit for.
That's fantastic. Now, coaching the coaches, we're approaching the summer months here. We're going to have a lot of coaches doing their USA Hockey, mandated modules that they have to do and things like that. In your experience, what are some of the best ways a coach can improve his game over the summer months?
Yeah, so I think maybe I can speak on kind of what I do. And, what works for me might not work for everybody, but I think first and foremost, I really like taking a step back and just kind of breathing. And I like right now I haven't been in a rink in a couple of weeks because it's just kind of my decompression time, and I kind of reflect on the season. What went well, what we could have done better, and kind of I'm right in the recruiting mode for college right now too, kind of just getting our last pieces together. So it's kind of reflecting on the season and thinking where do we need to go next year. So I think that's probably the first step of it is maybe just taking a step back and reflecting on what went well, and how did depending on the age level, but really anybody, how did the athletes, how did the players do that season, not just on the scoreboard, but in the locker room and off the ice and with their families and everything like that. Did you provide a good experience for those players, and how can you do it better? So I think a little self-reflection is a good first step. And then, after that, I kind of geek out on hockey. So I try to watch as many videos and, steal drills from other coaches and things I like, and, listen to podcasts. And I think, reading a bunch of articles. So I think, content consumption is a big piece for me and I think the summer is a great time to do it because, some of the other things are off your plate, right? So you can, and if you're a skills coach or you're running, jumping into camps, it's a good time to kind of experiment with some things. So I like doing that a little bit of like trying out some new drills, see how they work. If you're working with some kids in the off season, there's like the pressure's not there. So you can kind of tweak things a little bit and see how maybe some different drills can be run differently, or new kind of things to throw into your bag to use later. So that's kind of the second piece for me is, I just read a ton of books, some on leadership, some on hockey, some on, just coaching outside of the game of hockey, whether wooden or, basketball coaches, football coaches, whatever. And, reading some articles and just, getting as much info as I can. So those are the two big things I do. And then, and then after that, I look, I'd probably look at some sort of experiential thing. I mean, I think if coaches had the means or the time to do it, I think jumping into, like a conference is an awesome way to really just get fired up and connect with other people and learn a lot of different topics. or even just connecting with coaches at different rinks around the area in the summer. You kind of have an experience. Like a lot of the higher end coaches are less is on their table, so they're a little easier to get a hold of or get on the ice with when they're not with their actual team. So kind of getting some sort of an experiential piece of it where you're sitting down with people and talking. And then that kind of that fourth piece for me is kind of like what we're doing right now, is just networking and connecting with other coaches. And I think that's a big piece of it. I think you can go to as many USA Hockey clinics as you want. I taught them for 7 years, and it's there's good content in there, but at the end of the day, I think the most valuable piece of it is the conversations and the relationships you build with other coaches, where all of a sudden you have a sounding board with somebody that's maybe going through some of the same problems you are, that they've done before, and how do they deal with it, or connecting for things that have worked for them in the past, or problems and to avoid. So I don't know, those are kind of the 4 things that I look at doing, and I think there's a lot of we could probably talk for hours on each one of those, but
I think that's fantastic. And Trevor and I, we were talking about some of these similar topic, and we kind of explored some of the same avenues. But we also talked about, you mentioned number 2, books, reading books. We actually, there's so many books out there on hockey, but I think coaching is a big umbrella, and talking of reading books on how a football coaches, or a baseball manager manages. Or even, like you said, leadership, like how a CEO runs a company. Those are really important books that can really help sharpen your saw as you approach coaching your teams. One of the books we mentioned, we were talking about Darryl Belfry's book, and how it was really great for elite level athletes and elite level coaches, but it really was a struggle to adapt some of those strategies to younger players. What is a book, in your opinion, that is a really good book for youth hockey, like young players and coaching for young players?
Oh man, that's a good question. I should have had some books ready. I've been
sorry, Pete.
no, I've read the let me see. So I'll show you one that I'm reading right now. Got a couple books behind me, but like this is one that I just started reading, like by
that's a good book.
So I just started reading this one like last week. So I don't know if this is going to be the right answer or not, but this is the one I'm reading right now. It's a little bit of a mix of stories and
that was Loose Pucks and was it
Loose Pucks and Ice Bags by Dave King. That's one of kind of just a little summer reading for me. But I have a book here.
Read that last summer. Good book.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. There's another book that Ty Newberry wrote that I really like, and I'm kind of biased on it because I have a little section in it, but I like it because it's kind of like what we're talking about. He posed the question. I don't know if you know Ty or not, but he put together a book. I'm drawing a blank on the name.
Coaching Situational Hockey.
Yeah, that's the one. I like that one because it's so many different perspectives of different situations. Like he poses a question and he's got 3 or 4 different coaches that give their perspective on whatever that issue is. And I've recommended that to a lot of a couple of my college players have turned into coaches or hockey directors in the last couple of years, and that's one of the books I've recommended to them because it is mostly a youth hockey oriented book. And so that's one that I think is not really on a lot of people's radars, but I think there's a lot of really good knowledge in that one.
That's great.
That's my list right now.
Me too. I don't have that one. That's a good one.
Look at the names on this. Who's in here too? No, I mean, besides you, Pete. I mean, there's some other big names.
Yeah,
you
can rip my page out. You don't need to read that one.
No. I mean,
there's
I know
some good stuff in there.
Dave Starman, Dave Laszlo, Ryan Ward. Wow. I mean, just some guys I recognize. I mean, I know some of the other ones, but guys that I've talked to myself. So that's awesome. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's kind of under the radar. But I think that's a good one to read. And then, there's a couple books that, kind of more popular. Like I've read a couple of the John Wooden books and, coaching fundamentals and things like that of, the famous basketball coach and his philosophies. And I think that those have been, it's been a few years since I've read them, but I've definitely stolen a few pieces from those and thrown them into my kind of outlook on, because they're not hockey specific. They're more just, building culture and accountability and things like that.
Now, Pete, in terms of broad painting things with a broad brush here with coaching hockey, last 5 years or so, there's been a lot of changes. Everything from the COVID pandemic to shutting down hockey to just the way kids are different a little bit at the youth level, uh, and parenting within that kind of sphere. What are some of the changes you've seen and in which that coaches have had to adapt over the last couple years? The way they communicate with kids, or way they coach on the ice, where they coach on the bench. What are some of the changes you've seen in coaching youth athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. I think over the last handful of years, maybe this is before COVID, but just like from a society standpoint, there's the parents are more involved than probably in years past. Not always in the right way. So I think there's like a little bit of like an entitlement or piece for their kid, where there's like an overly harsh expectation of some of the volunteers that are putting in their time and effort for coaching, and then they, if the result's not 100% what they think, then I say then the world has to burn because it's
We've all seen those emails.
yeah. So I mean, and maybe it's just because of my position I have now. I'm seeing it more often, but I think that's there a little bit culturally, which is it poses some new challenges. And but from the athlete perspective, I think that the biggest thing I've been seeing, and I have young kids of my own that are just starting to come up, and I'm my one son is a very visual learner. I've come to find out, very similar ways my wife is, and and so I think like video is becoming like a huge piece of coaching, which I mean, when I grew up, I never had video. And, you obviously you see it in the pros and you see it in college and you see it in junior hockey, but, I think more and more youth programs are adopting video um, into their training. And it, I think there's probably some programs that have it regularly built in, but I'm seeing it more even like, everybody's got a GoPro, everybody's got a cell phone, you got live barn, you got things going out where like the kids are watching clips. And, I've done it on the ice with my cell phone of just like videoing a kid, even if it's like an 8-year-old, like doing a rep. And then I'll show it to them afterwards. Cause then they're visual, like they're seeing the feedback versus just hearing it. And
Yeah.
and like for my son who's 8, like I felt like I kept saying the same thing on like a couple little things, and it just wasn't sinking in. And then I just videoed it and I showed him, and he's like, "Oh, okay, now I get it." So I think that that's something that, like, even 5 years ago, I wasn't seeing that at all at the younger youth levels, and I think it's a lot more prominent now, where kids are learning from the video, and I think that's a good thing.
I do too.
Absolutely.
That's great stuff. Trevor, what do you got for Pete?
So, sorry. So yeah, I know that we discussed that you previously used to run all the coaching clinics, correct? Out in Montana. Was that?
Yeah, so I was coaching chief for the state of Montana for about 7.5 years. So I did, kind of travel around the state and did the coaching clinics to get all the USA Hockey CEP credits for the coaches, level 1, 2, 3, 4 for a couple of years.
So, in your experience in that, what do you think is probably, would you say within those sessions itself, did you see anything that was kind of like a common question that might come up amongst those coaches at any level? It could be the 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you see like any common ones, or was there, any common comments that were made, like, the typical, which we already know, like, oh, these kids, kids are different these days, or they can't do this or that, or
Yeah. Well, I think that, there's probably a couple things. I can't really pinpoint an exact question that
yeah,
would
I know
come
I'm
up a
putting
lot.
well on the spot here, but
Yeah, no, but I think, for a couple, I would say in general, and the coaches, whether it was a small, 10-person group, or I think the biggest one I ever did was like just shy of 100 people, but it was like, especially with the USA Hockey, like it's required training, right? Like people have to do it. And the people that went in with that mindset of like, I have to be here. This is so stupid. I wish I wasn't here, but I just have to. Like, let's just get this over with. Like, they got out of it what they put into it, right? And
right.
the coaches that, which is why I got involved in it. Like the coaches that would go there and be able to pull value out of those clinics. Like you can't get enough of those. Like those guys would love them. And so I really saw like the mindset. It was a common thing of like the mindset going in was the value those coaches extracted from those experiences. And the coaches that were really like, okay, I'm here to learn and I want to get better and I want to invest my time to it so I can invest into my players. Like those are the guys that are having a great time and loving it. And, yeah, maybe they already know a lot of the stuff you're going through, but also they're making relationships and they're hearing things said a different way, or they're, I used to do a lot of breakout groups. They don't really do those that much. I think a little bit now, but, you just hear from the other people. So that was one really big one. And I think, after that, it kind of went into, again, when we would break out, like a lot of the value, like it wasn't until you get to like the level 4s and 5s, you're not really getting a lot of X's and O's. I think people go in there thinking we're getting a lot of X's and O's, and that's not the
definitely.
value. It's more like, especially for, of like parent management and how to like appropriately coach a kid, like it's not just getting in their face and screaming and yelling when they're 7 years old. It's, like learning how to coach, like, what are some of the best practices that you should think about? And I think that the coaches that really took that to heart would gain from that. And I think third, the coaches that would, ask questions of like, I'm running into this problem. What do you think I should do? And I by no means would have all the answers for that, but invariably some people in the rooms would say like, well, I ran into that last year and this is what I did and this is how it worked out. And I think that those kind of situations were always a great thing. And I think, we've lost that a little bit with the transition to like fully online, because it's kind of like the meeting after the meeting is where all the kind of the magic happens with the people from that respect.
Right.
But I think that's why that experiential piece I touched on, I think is so huge, of just sitting down and talking with other coaches. You can kind of learn so much from that. Like it's how you build your style, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when level 3, you actually had it. Well, not even 4, I think, but at level 3, you had to be on the ice. Like you had to be, like gear up, and they'd run you through like little things here and there. But honestly, I mean, I do my modules every year, so nobody can yell at me here. But outside of that, I mean, I'm waiting for level 5 to come back around, and then I think that'll be the one I'd like to go again. So I at least get that done. But and then the other thing is with in regards to your position now, what does I'm assuming that encompasses, as you said, working with amongst parents and programs and stuff. How much involvement do you have with coaches right now, or in what capacity with your current position?
Yeah. So I about just shy of 2 years ago, I stepped down from being coach in chief of the state, and I took I basically transitioned into working full time in hockey. Before, hockey was always like this awesome passion I had and awesome side thing, and I jumped into working full time. The opportunity came up, and so I took a job as the executive director of Montana Amateur Hockey. And so what it really is it's Montana Amateur Hockey is a nonprofit, so I'm essentially the executive director of the nonprofit. So it's working with not only like keeping the wheels turning and the finances and things like that, but it's also growing the game from a numbers and experiential standpoint. But it's also being like a consultant or a reference for the associations that are kind of under our umbrella. So from that respect, I'm pretty fortunate in that I get to travel around the state, meet with a lot of the Youth Hockey Association boards, and just connect with coaches and parents, and kind of have that's kind of the fun part of the job, is connecting with people that just kind of want to talk hockey and throw different ideas around. So it's been a fun experience, just kind of transitioning. And I'm still coaching. I coach my kids team and I coach the college team, and but kind of the business of hockey, or the administrative piece of it, is kind of what I'm kind of doing from a day to day now too.
No, that's awesome when you get to do that, full time traveling around. I know that's the awesome part of the job, and I can only imagine what the non-awesome part is. But this is a family friendly show, so
Well, Pete, while we're talking about the USA Hockey element, if there's one thing that you could maybe change or tweak in terms of that coaching education program, what would be one thing?
Oh man, that's a good question too. I think the change they just made of requiring the continuing education credits, I think, is a really good thing. I think, there's going to be some people that disagree with that wholeheartedly. It's just more time and effort and stuff. But I think that that's a great thing. It just kind of puts people in. But I think if I were going to make a change, there a lot of the USA Hockey training, especially in like level 1 and level 2, is kind of like checking the boxes of like legality things, and these are the things you have to do to be a coach. And I think that rolling in, and I think they're starting to do this more and more, but rolling in different like kind of specialized pieces of that, because I think that's what a lot of the youth hockey coaches really want. Of how do I teach a certain transition, or how do I teach penalty kill? Like some of the X's and O's that, especially if it's a coach that doesn't have an extensive hockey background themselves, like it's just that mom or dad that's volunteering their time but didn't play hockey, or maybe they did and they just aren't comfortable with some of the strategies. And I think the continuing education is a great opportunity to put a lot of those pieces in, where you can specialize, just like they did with the goaltending clinics, of saying, okay, we're gonna, I think Hockey Canada does a really nice job of having tons of different pathways of these skill sets. It's almost like there's almost too many. Like it becomes complicated of knowing where to go on what you want. But I think having the opportunity to learn, like, hey, maybe I really want athlete nutrition, or I want strength training that's appropriate for young kids, or I want to talk about how do you do station based, not they do a lot of station based, but how do you do a breakout, or how do you certain, like, let's talk specifically on stride development or whatever that skill set might be. I think that there's an opportunity to really kind of segment some of those out and focus in and bring in just like they do with the goaltending, they bring in guys that are really, really good at that one skill, and being able to teach, and then layering in, I think, the level of not necessarily like this is what it is, but also how do you teach that, right? Like, so teaching the coaches how to teach the skill. And I think that would be my answer to that one for you.
Yeah, that's really a great the way you said that. I really like that. You can teach them you can implement a million different shooting drills in your practice, right? Or like give, an ADM model, station-based practice that incorporates a lot of shooting, but that doesn't necessarily mean your kids are going to improve their shot. It just means they're going to get a lot of volume in shooting how they've always been shooting. But being able to teach the specific skill is something I think is a little bit of a missing component so far that I've experienced within those levels of USA Hockey and their coaching education program. But if you can have those instructors who can come in and really provide more of that input and how to teach that specific skill, can make a big difference.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I see it with, like, with my elevated camps, if I'm hiring an assistant instructor or something, and I say, hey, you're going to run this drill. And I say, okay, like, these are the 3 problems you're probably going to see. Like, these are the 3 most common errors or like bad habits or whatever. And here's how you can correct those 3. Right. Like, so you just give like a plan of, like, when you see this mistake, like, here's a suggestion that you can give the kid to say, hey, try it this way next time, or try to point them in a direction. So I think that there's a lot of, like, not going down the road of necessarily like template based, but there's like common errors that maybe kids have at certain skills and certain levels, and there's quick fixes on a lot of those, that if sometimes a coach is given a little bit of a directive of, like, you're probably going to see this or this, and here's maybe a better way to demonstrate that or compensate for that. Like, I see it with little kids all the time when they're turning and they're dragging their inside toe, right, when they're turning.
I was just about to say the same thing about them not being on the outside edge.
Yeah, like every little kid.
First thing I thought of.
Like, they drag their inside toe to avoid their outside edge because they're not comfortable on it. And so, like, if you're running a big station-based practices, and you got, and then, for mites or squirts or whatever, and you got a bunch of dads that are helping out, but they're volunteering their time. They're doing great, but maybe they need that little, like, hey, like, you gotta hammer that down. Like, this is the one. So I've done that in some of the stations with my son's team of, like, okay, your one job, coach, is to watch that toe. Like, anytime a kid is dragging that toe, like, let's correct it. Let's correct it. And it's just breaking bad habits like that. So that's probably an opportunity that USA Hockey has of just saying like, here's all these bad habits that you're probably going to run into, and here's some ways to kind of point kids. So I think that's a big like problem. I think people just assume that station-based practices means like, like there's kind of a mentality of instruction is wrong, almost like small area games, like just throw a puck and let the kids play and they'll figure it out on their own. Like, yeah, they'll figure challenges out on their own, but sometimes they need a little bit of like mechanical correction and demonstration too, I think.
Agreed. That's awesome. Trevor, you got anything more for Pete?
No, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time out and working with us. It's funny that you thought about the inside tell, because that's literally the first thing that I was fortunate to work with some people who, never turned down a parent who wanted to be involved volunteer wise.
Yeah.
As long as they can get on skates, and even if they couldn't, I mean, if they can get them on the bench at least. But yeah, I mean, as you said, like, hey, this is the one thing I want you to do is make sure this kid stops with good knee bend every single time here. Like, you can use anybody. I mean, almost anybody as long as they can get on skates. Like I said, um, but yeah, that inside, the outside edge. I still do. I mean, I've dealt with it last season when I was working with the 16 U age group, where some of these kids just really struggle with it. So it's just funny that you thought that. But no, Pete, that's
Yeah.
all I got for you today.
Nice. Yeah. Coming out there.
Well, thank you very much, Coach, for coming on, and good luck with this upcoming season. Hope you have a great summer with your elevated camps and everything going on in Montana hockey, and we'll be watching out for you. So thanks again.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Andrew, Trevor, thanks for having me on, man. This is a blast, and hope to do it again sometime with you guys. Thank you.
So thanks again to Coach Pete for jumping on the podcast. Hopefully that provided a lot of information for our listeners about, sharpening your saw as a coach in the off season, coaching the coaches, what you can do for coaches in your program to improve what they're doing on the ice, in the locker room, and with your athletes. Coach Trevor, I think that brings us to a nice little segue here. Favorite
Yeah.
coaches of all time. What do you think, buddy? Top three? Top three?
Okay.
Top five? What do you got here?
I would say top three we could go with. Are we doing like any coach, like anybody, or I mean, or do we gotta like pick? Are we picking a different league? Are we different like level?
Oh, that's a good one. Do we go all sports? Do we go all just hockey coaches? Do we go NHL coaches, or do we go like just? I think we go all levels hockey coaches. What do you think?
Okay. All right. Top three for, I mean, okay, so I'm gonna take out my uncle because he coached me for like 4 years. So I gotta take him out because I mean he would have to be number one if he's listening. Um, outside of that, um, you know, I'm gonna talk about him. It's like one of those things where they tell you that you need to remove the artist from the art. So I'm and I know you're so with the first one, I want to go with Joel Quenneville um as a coach on the ice. We're not ignoring the scandal that happened. We're going to talk about him as a hockey coach for the rest of the players in those teams. He
You can't dispute the cups and the success. That is without saying.
right. He was a guy who demanded a lot from his players. He wanted them to play, a certain way. But he was also, I mean, it seemed like he was a personal kind of guy. He there were times where, the Chicago Blackhawks would actually have like coaching seminars where we could come down to the UC and sit in. And then there was like a rotation of him and a few of the other guys. I want to say John Torchetti, Mike Havlin, a few of the other guys. I think Stefan Waite was the goalie coach then. It wasn't Tracciak. But they would walk around and then they would kind of get like their own like, little, here's our short presentation. But like listening to him and Torchetti at the time, like this is gotta be like 2009, 2010. Man, I mean, it was like they just like seemed like, I mean, it made it a young coach like myself like realize like these guys are just like me. Like they goof off just like me. They're cracking jokes just like, everybody. But, somebody asked him, like, coach, like how many forecheck systems do you have? And he's like, uh, well, he goes, it depends on, like, the timing of the game. He goes, but penalty kill one, uh, power play, or he goes, we should have the puck. And he goes, outside of that, probably like two. And the look on this guy's face, like he thought he was going to be getting like 7 or 8, 9, 10, and like all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're really only just using. And again, they're using a 2-on-2 and a 1-2-2. That was it. Like this guy thought he was going to get these like advanced X's and O's, and it's just like, shit, that's the same stuff we teach our kids. So, one of my favorite hockey coaches to watch, because I mean he demanded the respect. He earned the respect of his players. And he you know what he knew what he was talking. I mean, he knew what he was talking about. He knew what he was doing. I mean, 3 cups, great. They had good teams, but they did a lot of plugging and chugging there. And honestly, if I'm gonna say it, I think he could be a candidate for the Toronto Maple Leafs job. If I'm being honest, I think there's a strong chance he could go there. So
Well,
that'll be one of mine.
I was going to ask you if he resurfaces this year because I'd love to have him for the Devils. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a great coach, and you know, the times have changed. Things like obviously the scandal was a big deal, but people make mistakes, and nobody's perfect, and um, I'd like to see people get a second chance at things, especially when they're so obviously good at something, and he certainly is a spectacular coach.
And he's come out and said, he's done his own, podcast, and, not his own podcast, but he was on Strickland, and I want to say it was a Jansen or whatever, their podcast, where they just asked him point blank questions, and like he didn't hide behind him. I know that he thought, he probably should have done a better job of, you know, checking in and seeing where things are at, but there are checks and balances, and everybody admittedly has failed, Kyle Beach, but taking that aside, and I know it's like you shouldn't, but taking that aside from everything else, like, he was just he ran some of the best Hawk teams that will ever see. So yeah, he's definitely in my top three. Who is one from your top three, coach?
I'm going to go right off the bat with a current coach. I love John Cooper. I think John Cooper is a fantastic coach. I mean, obviously, 2 cups, um, has a great backstory of just having success at every single level from midget hockey and then working his way up. One of my good buddies, John Roger, who I coach with at the US JDP every summer with one of Mike Gempler's camps, he always works it with me. And he was his assistant in the North American League and in the USHL. And just always says how strong Cooper can command a room, and how he develops relationships with each kid. And that's fantastic for these modern athletes, these types of kids now. They don't really want that, that coach who's in your face and that Mike Keenan type coach. It doesn't resonate these days with that type of kid. That's a bygone era. But Cooper, it's like having a trusted companion behind the bench with you, and who can also, like, you have the respect of as a person, who is knowledgeable, who is fair given the circumstances. One of the best stories I love is, when the finals they lost, when Vasilevsky got shelled for like 7 in one of the games, and they asked him after the game, why didn't he pull Vasilevsky? And his response was, that's my guy. Like, I'm going to go back to him next game. He doesn't want to be pulled. He wants to fight through it. So why would I pull him? That makes no sense to me because he's going to get the next start anyway. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Right. No, it sucks that you said that. I mean, it's great you said it, but it sucks because that's who I was going to use as my other current like number. That would be my number 2. But, that puts me a little bit. I agree. I mean, I like Cooper. I like the fact that he's not even a guy who played pro hockey. I mean, he's just, as you said, he's a lawyer. He just moves. He's like almost like Gordon Bombay without the DUI.
Well, how about you put Cooper's your 2, Quenville's my 2,
Okay.
and then we just do a 3 each.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Let's say any level. again, I mean, I've got my mentors, like I've talked about, like Randy Jordan, who I thought, I'll go with him. I'll use him as number three. Randy is a guy who will give you the shirt off his back. Um, and he is from Vancouver, British Columbia. He's been around the game forever. Great stories. He's played with some great, phenomenal players. But he's a guy who has really helped me as a coach. But I've watched how many kids that he's worked with. And here's a guy who took over for a park district that had just gotten a brand new ice sheet. And then the first 2 days, like the first day of, give it like learn to skate, I think there's like 3 kids show up, like for their development. And he had to go out and basically create what at one point was one of the, I would say, again, this is being biased, but I would say one of the top programs that were on the cusp of being in the top, 5, 6 in tier 2 hockey in Illinois. For some just unforeseen circumstances happen. But he built such a huge, passionate group of coaches and the players, and just a passion that he exudes. It's second to none. And I've recommended numerous players and parents like, hey, my kid needs skating. He's fanatical about skills, but especially skating, and the passion that he brings. Like, I don't think I've ever seen him to a player be negative. Like, he's always found a way to find that positive message in it while still getting his point across. Like, you could think maybe, oh, okay, maybe it's like where I would say, well, yeah, you need to get your ass lower, closer, butt down, or bend your knees more. Like, he finds the better way of saying it and really kind of pushes the players. And again, just as the hockey director and as a coach, he really built those everybody up. And he was everyone's biggest fan, and everyone loved him. And it's not his eulogy here or anything. But it's basically just how he is as a coach, and people are still calling him left and right or emailing him or, you know, whatever. He's just so respected. And, again, if I could be at least half the coach that he is, just with his attitude and his willingness and wanting to learn. Yeah, I mean, that I never got to play for him, but that would be the type of coach where I wish I would have had back when I was
That's
growing up.
phenomenal. Haven't had really too many interactions with him, but he's on my Substack, and he
Yep.
responds to some of my emails, and it's always nice and it's always encouraging.
Yep.
And
60 plus years old, and he's still taking in information like there's nobody's business about it.
that's
So,
phenomenal. That's awesome.
what do you got on number three now, coach?
My number three is my brother from another mother, Oktay Armigan. I know that name is not like an NHL name, but he's a skills coach in the USHL for Youngstown. He works a lot with the Black Bear Sports Group. I know, but he handles mostly their skills for a lot of different parts of their businesses and a lot of the hundreds of teams that they have. He's based out of New Jersey. He's originally from Queens, New York. He lived in the Poconos when I met him, and he attended my dad's hockey camp in Bricktown, New Jersey. So I met him when I was probably 11. He was probably 14, and we became friends. And when I started getting into coaching, he gave me one of my first coaching jobs in junior hockey. And one of the things that I think makes Oktay exceptional is he has a high standard that he holds the kids accountable to. He can be really hard on the kids, like tough on the kids, but inevitably there's moments during the season when those kids have earned his respect and they have a bond with those kids that is almost unbreakable. And he really can develop that relationship with an athlete where he expects more out of them and he gets more out of them because they believe in what he's saying, they believe in how he's saying it. And he can take a very simple drill, but the way he explains it and the way he motivates kids to do it at their full capacity is second to none. And he's really a dynamic coach. And I'm just really proud of Oktay in terms of like how far he's come within the game. And if you haven't had skills from Oktay in New Jersey, he's a guy you gotta pick up some skills from. He has a son, Everett, who's the same age as my son Bear. Bear doesn't listen to me at all, and so Bear jumped out with one of Everett's skills on like a random, I was down there for a trip, and I was like, "Oh, can you get it Bear on the ice?" He's like, "Sure, come on, jump out with Everett." And Bear wasn't receiving passes correctly. I've told him 1,000 times, "You're doing it wrong, Bear." He does it once with Oktay, does it wrong, and Oktay's like, "Why are you holding your stick?" Just kind of loses it on him, and Bear's like looking at him with these big eyes. But then he like put his arm around him. And it's like, "This is how you do it." And it's like, clicked, snapped. Next one, he put in the back of the net. So it's like you can see, like, oh, that makes sense. That's good stuff.
No, that's again, it's funny that we both go back to back with guys who communicate well, and I think honestly, like all of the coaches we've discussed, they communicate well. They're kind of a player's coach. Guys that you really again you'd want to run through a wall for. Um, and I think that's really, the old school days where, you're getting beat down by your coaching, it's the drill sergeant stuff isn't around. I mean, it doesn't fly anymore. You know, not even in football really. It doesn't fly that more. So
Very true.
I think that's kind of one of the big everybody's all in that same circle of this is kind of the style. I mean, I'm sure Quenville's probably can be a little bit of a jerk at times or a prick at times, but he might be he's the exception to our rule on the list. But
Well, I hope he's coaching the Devils next year. I tell you that much.
yeah, no, I think he's going to be somewhere. But yeah, no, well, that wraps up today's episode. Coach, you got anything before we leave?
No, thanks for tuning in, and we'll have some good guests coming up here pretty soon. We got some good people on our radar. So thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will catch everybody next time.